Snow fell like tiny knives against Denise Washington's face as she sat huddled on the metal bench at the bus stop. Her fingers, purple and numb, clutched the thin blanket around her shoulders while her stomach twisted with hunger she'd felt for 3 days straight. The cardboard box beside her held everything she owned now: a few clothes, a water bottle, and a picture of her late grandmother who had raised her. 2 months ago she had a job, an apartment, and hope. Now she had nothing but the bitter cold seeping through her worn jacket and the cruel stares of people who hurried past without seeing her humanity. The eviction notice still burned in her memory. When the small diner where she worked for 2 years closed down without warning, she couldn't pay rent. The landlord gave her 1 week. She'd knocked on every door, applied to every job, but no one wanted to hire someone with no permanent address. Her savings disappeared quickly, and her few friends couldn't help long-term. Pride had kept her from asking for charity until pride became a luxury she couldn't afford. Yet even now, sitting in this frozen hell, her pride whispered that she was worthless, forgotten, invisible. The bus stop offered little shelter from the December wind that cut through the city like a blade. People walked by in thick coats and warm boots, their breath forming clouds as they talked on phones about dinner plans and holiday shopping. None of them looked at her. She might as well have been part of the bench, just another piece of urban furniture covered in snow. Her lips were so chapped they bled when she tried to lick them, and her feet had gone numb hours ago in her thin sneakers that let in water through holes she couldn't afford to fix. A businessman in an expensive coat approached the bus stop, checking his gold watch. When he saw her, his face twisted with disgust and he stepped several feet away, pulling out his phone as if she might contaminate him. Denise pulled the blanket tighter and looked down at her hands. She'd been pretty once, or at least clean. Now her dark hair hung limp and greasy, her clothes smelled despite her efforts to wash in public bathrooms, and her brown skin looked ashy from the cold and poor nutrition. She felt like a ghost of her former self. The snow kept falling, and with each flake her hope died a little more. Maybe she should just lie down and let the cold take her. Maybe that would be easier than facing another night of trying to find somewhere warm to sleep, another day of rejection and hunger. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind, telling her to never give up, but Grandma Rose had never been homeless in winter with no family and no options. The voice grew fainter each day as reality pressed down like the heavy gray sky above. Then she heard small footsteps crunching through the snow. A little girl with curly hair peeking out from under a pink knit hat walked straight toward her, ignoring the businessman who looked around nervously. The child wore a puffy white coat that probably cost more than Denise had ever made in a month, and her small boots were lined with fur. But it was her face that stopped Denise's heart, big brown eyes full of curiosity and kindness, not judgment or fear. "Hi," the little girl said simply, stopping right in front of Denise. "Are you cold?" Denise's throat felt raw from not speaking to anyone in days. "Yes, sweetheart. Very cold." Her voice came out as a whisper. The child tilted her head, studying Denise with the serious expression only children could manage. "My daddy says when people are cold and sad we should help them. Are you sad too?" Tears froze on Denise's cheeks before she could stop them. "Yes, honey. I'm very sad." Without hesitation, the little girl began unwrapping the thick scarf from around her neck. It was soft and warm, clearly expensive. "Here, this will help." She stepped forward and carefully wrapped it around Denise's neck, her small fingers gentle and sure. "No, sweetie, I can't take your scarf. You'll be cold." But even as she protested, the warmth felt like heaven against her skin. "I have lots of scarves," the girl said matter-of-factly. "Daddy buys me new ones all the time. But you don't have any." She sat down on the bench next to Denise, completely unafraid. "What's your name?" "Denise." "What's yours?" "I'm Sophie. I'm 4 years old." She held up 4 tiny fingers. "How old are you?" 26. Sophie nodded as if this was important information. "My mommy went to heaven when I was little." "Do you have a mommy?" The innocent question hit harder than the cold wind. "No, honey. My grandma raised me, but she went to heaven too." Sophie's expression grew thoughtful. Then she looked directly into Denise's eyes with a seriousness that seemed impossible for someone so young. "You need a home and I need a mommy. Maybe we can help each other." Before Denise could respond, a tall man in an expensive black coat came running toward them, his face a mask of panic and relief. "Sophie, there you are. I told you to stay close to Daddy." His voice was rich and deep, with just a hint of an accent she couldn't place. The man stopped short when he saw his daughter sitting next to Denise, his dark eyes taking in the scene with quick intelligence. He was handsome in the way that money and good genes created: sharp jawline, perfectly styled black hair, and clothes that screamed wealth, But it was the genuine concern in his expression as he looked at his daughter, then at Denise, that made her heart skip. "Daddy, this is Denise," Sophie announced proudly. "She's cold and sad, so I gave her my scarf. She needs a home and I need a mommy. Can she come live with us?" The businessman from earlier snorted with disgust. "Some people will use children to scam you," he muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. "Don't fall for it." The man's jaw tightened as he looked at the businessman, but his voice remained calm. "I think you should mind your own business." The tone was polite but carried the weight of someone accustomed to being obeyed. The businessman huffed and walked away. Turning back to Denise, the man's expression softened. "I'm sorry about him. I'm James Rodriguez." He extended a gloved hand, which Denise shook hesitantly with her numb fingers. "And you've clearly made an impression on my daughter." "I'm sorry," Denise said quickly, starting to unwrap the scarf. "I told her she shouldn't give this to me. I wasn't trying to take anything from her." "Keep it," James said firmly. "Sophie's right, you need it more than she does right now." He studied Denise's face with eyes that seemed to see everything. "How long have you been out here?" The question was asked without judgment, with genuine concern that made Denise's chest tight. 3 days at this stop. Longer in other places." She looked down at her hands. "I lost my job when the diner closed. Then my apartment. I've been trying to find work, but it's hard to get hired without an address," James finished. "And impossible to get an address without income." Denise looked up in surprise. "Yes, exactly." Sophie had been listening intently, her small face scrunched in concentration. "Daddy, we have lots of rooms. Can't Denise stay in one?" James was quiet for a long moment, studying both his daughter and Denise. Finally he said, "When's the last time you ate?" "Tuesday," Denise admitted, though it was now Friday. Without another word, James pulled out his phone and made a quick call. "Maria?" "Yes, we'll be home in an hour. Can you prepare lunch for 3? And maybe set up the guest house, we might have someone staying with us for a while." He listened for a moment. "Yes, I'm sure. Thank you." Denise's eyes widened. "Mr. Rodriguez, you don't know me. I could be dangerous or—" "Are you dangerous?" he asked simply. "No, but—" "Sophie has excellent judgment about people," he said, looking at his daughter who was beaming. "And frankly, anyone who would sit here in the snow rather than take advantage of a 4-year-old's kindness can't be too bad." He stood and held out his hand. "Come on. Let's get you warm and fed and then we can figure out the rest." Denise stared at his outstretched hand, hardly believing this was real. "I can't just accept charity from strangers." "You're not strangers," Sophie said firmly. "You're my friend. And friends help each other." James smiled at his daughter, then looked back at Denise. "She's right. And it's not charity, it's basic human decency. Something that seems to be in short supply these days." His expression grew serious. "Look, I'm not asking you to move in permanently or make any big decisions. I'm asking you to let us give you a safe place to sleep tonight and a warm meal. That's all." The businessman had been right about one thing: this was too good to be true. Rich men didn't just rescue homeless women off the street. But looking into James's eyes, Denise saw only sincerity. And Sophie was looking at her with such hope that refusing would break the child's heart. "Okay," she whispered, taking his hand. James's grip was firm and warm, and when he helped her stand she realized how tall he was, at least 6 feet compared to her 5'4" frame. Sophie immediately grabbed Denise's other hand, swinging it happily as they walked toward a black luxury car parked across the street. "I knew you'd say yes," Sophie chattered as they walked. "Daddy always helps people. He gives money to the animal shelter and the school and the hospital. But he never brings people home. You're special." Denise caught James looking at her over Sophie's head, his expression unreadable. She wondered if he was already regretting his impulse, but when he smiled, it reached his eyes. "Sophie's right," he said quietly. "This is definitely a first for me." As they reached the car, James opened the back door for both of them. The interior was warm leather and luxury, a stark contrast to the metal bench she'd called home for 3 days. Sophie climbed in first, patting the seat for Denise to sit next to her. "Are you excited?" Sophie asked as James started the engine. "Our house is really big. And Maria makes the best cookies. And we have a pool, but it's too cold to swim right now. Do you like to swim?" Denise found herself smiling for the first time in months. "I used to love swimming when I was your age." "Perfect. When it gets warm we can swim together. Right, Daddy?" In the rearview mirror, James met Denise's eyes. "Right, Princess. When it gets warm." As they drove through the city, Denise watched the neighborhoods change from urban decay to manicured suburbs to what could only be described as mansion territory. Her stomach clenched with nerves. What was she doing? This man could be anyone, want anything from her. But then Sophie reached over and took her hand, and somehow all her fears seemed less important than this child's simple faith in goodness. The Rodriguez house was not just big, it was magnificent. A sprawling Mediterranean-style estate with cream-colored stone, red tile roof, and perfectly manicured grounds that probably cost more to maintain than most people made in a year. As they pulled through the iron gates and up the circular driveway, Denise felt her anxiety spike. She didn't belong in a place like this. "Welcome home," Sophie announced proudly as James parked in front of the main entrance. A middle-aged Hispanic woman opened the front door before they even got out of the car. She was small but carried herself with authority, wearing a navy dress and apron that marked her as household staff. Her dark eyes went immediately to Denise, taking in her appearance with a mixture of concern and curiosity. "Maria, this is Denise," James said as they approached. "She'll be staying in the guest house for a while." Maria's expression softened immediately. "Of course, Mr. James. I've prepared lunch and aired out the guest house." She looked at Denise kindly. "Are you hungry, dear?" The simple kindness in her voice almost brought Denise to tears again. "Very much so, ma'am." "None of that ma'am business. I'm Maria." She ushered them inside, taking Denise's thin jacket. "My goodness, you're frozen through. Come, let's get some food in you and warm you up." The inside of the house was even more impressive than the outside. High ceilings, marble floors, artwork that looked like it belonged in museums. But it was also clearly a home, not just a showpiece. Sophie's toys were neatly arranged in a corner of the vast living room, and family photos lined the mantelpiece above a fireplace big enough to stand in. "Sophie, why don't you show Denise around while Maria finishes lunch?" James suggested. Sophie grabbed Denise's hand eagerly. "Come on. I want to show you everything." The tour was enthusiastic and thorough. Sophie showed her the library with floor-to-ceiling books, the game room with every console and toy imaginable, her own room which was a little girl's dream in pink and purple, and finally James's home office where she peeked in reverently. "Daddy works really hard," Sophie explained in a whisper. "He has meetings on the computer and talks to people all over the world. He builds things." "What kind of things?" "Big buildings and houses and stores. He says he makes places where people can live and work and be happy." Through the open office door, Denise could see awards and certificates on the walls, along with architectural drawings and city skylines. James Rodriguez wasn't just wealthy, he was successful in his own right. "Lunch is ready," Maria called from downstairs. The dining room could have seated 20 people, but Maria had set 3 places at one end of the long table, making it feel more intimate. The food was simple but perfect: grilled chicken, rice, vegetables, and fresh bread that smelled like heaven. Denise tried to eat slowly to have manners, but her body betrayed her hunger. "It's okay," James said quietly, noticing her struggle. "Eat as much as you want." Sophie kept up a steady stream of chatter throughout the meal, telling Denise about her school, her friends, her favorite TV shows. It was clear she was starved for female attention, and Denise found herself drawn to the child's enthusiasm and genuine affection. After lunch, James led them out back to show Denise the guest house. It was actually a small cottage, complete with a living area, kitchenette, bedroom, and bathroom. It was larger and nicer than any apartment Denise had ever lived in. "It's too much," she said, overwhelmed. "It's just sitting here empty," James replied. "Maria comes in once a week to dust, but no one ever uses it." He showed her the closet, which had been stocked with clothes in her size. Maria guessed at sizes. "If anything doesn't fit, we can exchange it." Denise ran her hand over a soft sweater, hardly believing it was real. "How did she know my size?" "Maria has 6 daughters," James said with a smile. "She has supernatural powers when it comes to women's clothing sizes." Sophie had discovered the small TV and was bouncing on the couch. "This is perfect. You can watch movies and be comfortable and warm." "Mr. Rodriguez," Denise began, but he held up a hand. "James. And before you say it's too much again, let me ask you something. What would you do if you found Sophie sitting alone in the snow?" The question stopped her protests cold. "I'd do everything I could to help her." "Exactly. So let us help you." His dark eyes were serious. "I'm not expecting anything from you if that's what you're worried about. This isn't some kind of transaction. Sophie likes you and frankly so do I. You seem like someone who's had some bad luck but isn't looking for a handout. Those are the people most worth helping." Sophie climbed off the couch and wrapped her arms around Denise's waist. "Please stay. I promise you'll like it here. Looking down at the child's hopeful face, Denise felt the last of her resistance crumble. Okay. But I want to earn my keep somehow. I can clean, cook, help with Sophie. We'll figure something out, James said. For now, just rest and recover. You've been through enough. That evening, after James had tucked Sophie into bed and gone to his office to work, Denise sat in her new temporary home trying to process everything that had happened. This morning she'd been freezing and hopeless. Now she was warm, fed, clean, and safe. It felt like a dream she might wake up from at any moment. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Maria stood outside with a steaming mug. Hot chocolate, she said, stepping inside. Thought you might need it. Thank you. Denise accepted the mug gratefully. Maria, can I ask you something? Of course. Is he always like this? Mr. Rodriguez, I mean. Does he always help strangers? Maria settled into the chair across from her, her expression thoughtful. Mr. James has a good heart, always has. He gives money to charities, supports the community. But bringing someone home. She shook her head. Never. That little girl of his, though she has him wrapped around her finger. If Sophie wants something, Sophie gets it. She's special, Denise agreed. Lost her mama when she was just 2, Maria said sadly. Cancer. Mr. James has raised her alone since then, turned down every woman who's tried to get close. Sophie is his whole world. She studied Denise carefully. But today, watching him with you, watching Sophie with you. Maybe that's about to change. I'm not trying to be anything more than grateful, Denise said quickly. Maria smiled. I know, dear. That's probably why it's working. The next 2 weeks passed like a beautiful dream Denise was afraid to wake up from. Each morning, she would hear Sophie's laughter outside her window as the little girl played in the garden before school. Maria would knock with fresh coffee and pastries, insisting that Denise join the family for breakfast. And James, despite his busy schedule running a multi-million-dollar construction company, always made time to ask how she was settling in. Denise had insisted on earning her place, so Maria had graciously allowed her to help with household tasks. She found herself naturally gravitating toward anything involving Sophie packing her lunch, helping with homework, reading bedtime stories when James was stuck on late conference calls with international clients. The little girl absorbed her attention like a flower turning toward the sun. You're so good with her, James observed one evening as they watched Sophie build an elaborate castle with blocks in the living room. They sat on opposite ends of the large sectional sofa, but Denise was acutely aware of his presence. She's an amazing kid, Denise replied, watching Sophie carefully balance a tower. You've done an incredible job raising her. James's expression grew soft. Some days I wonder if I'm enough. She needs feminine influence, mother figures. Maria tries, but she has her own family to go home to. Sophie's tower toppled, and she giggled instead of getting frustrated. Oops. Denise, will you help me build it again? Of course, sweetheart. Denise slid down to the floor, and Sophie immediately snuggled up against her side as they began rebuilding. James watched them together, something unreadable in his dark eyes. Over the past 2 weeks, Denise had caught him looking at her like that several times as if he was trying to figure out a puzzle. It made her nervous and excited at the same time. Daddy, come help us, Sophie commanded, and James obediently joined them on the floor. As they built together, their hands would occasionally brush reaching for the same block. Each touch sent electricity through Denise's arm, and she wondered if James felt it too. He gave no sign, maintaining the same friendly but careful distance he'd kept since she arrived. There. Sophie announced as they placed the final block. It's perfect. Just like our family. The words hung in the air. Denise felt her cheeks warm as James cleared his throat. Sophie, remember what we talked about, he said gently. Denise is our friend who's staying with us for a while. Sophie's face scrunched in confusion. But she takes care of me and makes you smile more, and she lives here. That sounds like family to me. From the mouths of babes. Denise busied herself cleaning up the blocks, not trusting herself to look at James. Later that night, after Sophie was asleep, Denise was reading in the guest house when James knocked on her door. He stood on her small porch holding 2 cups of coffee, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. I thought you might want some company, he said. Unless you're tired. No, please come in. She stepped back to let him enter, very aware that this was the first time they'd been truly alone together. He handed her a cup and sat on the small sofa, leaving space for her. I wanted to apologize for Sophie earlier. She gets ideas in her head. She's 4, Denise said, settling beside him. 4-year-olds say what they think. Still, I don't want you to feel pressured or uncomfortable. I know this situation is unusual. Denise studied his profile in the soft lamplight. James, can I ask you something? Anything. Why did you really bring me home that day? He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Finally he said, Sophie's never approached a stranger before. She's actually quite shy with new people. But she walked right up to you like she'd known you forever. He turned to look at her. And when I saw you with her, the way you were so gentle despite being in such a horrible situation, I knew you were someone special. I was just being human. Exactly. You were hungry and cold and desperate, but you still tried to refuse her scarf because you didn't want a child to be cold. Most people would have taken it and asked for more. They sat in comfortable silence, sipping their coffee. The cottage felt intimate and cozy with both of them there. What about you? James asked eventually. How are you really doing? I know this has to be overwhelming. Denise considered the question seriously. Honestly, I keep waiting for the catch. People like you don't just rescue people like me without wanting something in return. People like me? She gestured around the luxurious space. Rich, successful, handsome. The last word slipped out before she could stop it and she felt her face burn. James's eyebrows rose, and a slow smile spread across his face. Handsome. I didn't mean to say that out loud, she mumbled into her coffee cup. I'm glad you did. His voice was softer now, and when she looked up, his eyes were warm. For the record, I think you're beautiful. The words hung between them, changing something fundamental in the air. Denise felt her heart race as James leaned slightly closer. James, she whispered, not sure if she was warning him away or encouraging him. I know this is complicated, he said. I know the situation makes everything unclear. But I want you to know that my feelings for you have nothing to do with gratitude or pity or any kind of power imbalance. What do they have to do with? You. He reached out and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The way you light up when Sophie tells you about her day. The way you insist on helping Maria even though you're a guest. The way you're kind to everyone but expect nothing for yourself. You're remarkable, Denise. She felt tears prick her eyes. I'm homeless. I have nothing to offer someone like you. You have everything to offer, he said firmly. You have a heart bigger than anyone I've ever met. You have patience and kindness and strength. Do you know how incredible it is that you've been through what you've been through and you're still gentle? Still trusting enough to accept help? His hand was still near her face and she leaned into the touch without thinking. I'm scared, she admitted. Of what? Of this being too good to be true. Of waking up back on that bench. Of falling for someone who's so far out of my league that it's ridiculous. James cupped her face gently. What if I told you I was scared too? You? What could you possibly be scared of? Of not being good enough for you. Of Sophie getting attached and then losing another mother figure. Of messing this up because I've forgotten how to be with someone who matters. The vulnerability in his voice undid her. This strong, successful man was as uncertain as she was. Without thinking, she covered his hand with hers. We're both pretty scared, aren't we? Terrified, he agreed, and they both laughed softly. So what do? We take it slow, James said. We see what happens. And we don't let fear stop us from finding out if this could be something real. Denise nodded, feeling a hope she'd thought was lost forever blooming in her chest. Maybe, just maybe, the little girl who'd rescued her from the snow had been right. Maybe they really could help each other. 3 weeks into her stay, Denise had settled into a routine that felt surprisingly natural. She would wake up to Sophie's excited voice calling her name, help the little girl get ready for school while James showered and dressed for work, then share breakfast with both of them before James dropped Sophie at preschool on his way to the office. The days were filled with small domestic tasks that felt more like privileges than chores. She helped Maria with laundry, tended the garden, and prepared Sophie's afternoon snack for when she came home. But the best part of every day was when James would return from work, his serious businessman facade melting away the moment he saw his daughter running to greet him. Daddy, guess what Denise and I did today? Sophie would announce, launching into elaborate stories about their afternoon adventures. Sometimes they'd baked cookies with Maria, other times they'd built blanket forts or had tea parties with Sophie's stuffed animals. James would listen to every word, his eyes frequently finding Denise over Sophie's head with a warmth that made her stomach flutter. The careful distance he'd maintained was slowly dissolving, replaced by casual touches, his hand on her shoulder when he passed behind her chair at dinner, their fingers brushing when he handed her his coffee cup to refill, the way he'd automatically help her with her coat. You two are getting comfortable, Maria observed one afternoon as they prepared dinner together. She'd noticed James and Denise's easy synchronization in the kitchen, the way they moved around each other without colliding, how Denise automatically seasoned his food the way he liked it. "Is that obvious?" Denise asked, feeling her cheeks warm. "Honey, Mr. James hasn't smiled this much in 3 years. And Sophie?" Maria glanced toward the living room where Sophie was setting up her toy kitchen. "That child is blooming like a flower in spring. She needs a mama and she's chosen you. Maria, I can't let her get too attached if this isn't going to work out." "Who says it's not going to work out?" Denise paused in chopping vegetables. "Look at me, then look at him. We're from completely different worlds." "Love doesn't care about worlds," Maria said wisely. "And that man is falling hard for you, different worlds or not." That evening proved Maria's point. James had been working late on a difficult project, stress evident in the tight lines around his eyes when he finally came home at 9 o'clock. Sophie was already in bed and Denise had kept his dinner warm. "You didn't have to wait up," he said, gratefully accepting the plate she handed him. "I wanted to," she replied simply, settling across from him at the kitchen island. "Rough day?" "The worst. The city rejected our permits for the downtown project, and we're looking at months of delays." He ran a hand through his hair. "Sometimes I wonder why I chose such a complicated business." "Because you love building things that matter," Denise said. "Sophie told me about the affordable housing project you're working on. That's going to change people's lives." James looked up from his food, surprise in his eyes. "You've been listening to my 4-year-old's interpretation of my work?" She's very articulate for 4. "She said you want to build homes for people who don't have enough money for the fancy places so they can have somewhere safe and nice to live too." "That's actually exactly what I'm trying to do." Denise smiled. "She's proud of you. She understands that what you do helps people, even if she doesn't get all the details." Something shifted in James's expression. He pushed his plate aside and leaned forward. "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "Make everything make sense. Make me remember why I started this company in the first place instead of just focusing on the headaches." "I just listened to your daughter talk about her hero." James was quiet for a moment. "She's not the only one who thinks you're special, you know?" The word sent warmth spreading through Denise's chest. "James? I know we said we'd take things slow," he said, standing and moving around the island to stand in front of her stool. "But I need you to know something." She tilted her head back to look at him. "What?" "This isn't gratitude talking or some kind of savior complex. These feelings I have for you, they're real. They're growing stronger every day." Denise's heart hammered against her ribs. "I feel it too," she whispered. James reached out and gently cupped her face. "I want to kiss you. I've wanted to kiss you for weeks." "What's stopping you?" "I need to be sure you want this. Really want this. Not because you feel obligated or grateful, but because you want me." In response, Denise slid off the stool and stepped closer, closing the distance between them. "I want you," she said clearly. "I want this." James's hands framed her face as he lowered his head, and when their lips met, it felt like coming home. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, then deepened as Denise's arms wound around his neck. He tasted like coffee and promises, and she never wanted it to end. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "Wow," Denise whispered. "Wow," James agreed, resting his forehead against hers. "Daddy?" "Denise?" They sprang apart as Sophie appeared in the kitchen doorway, rubbing her eyes. "What are you doing up, princess?" James asked, his voice slightly rough. "I had a bad dream. I was looking for you." Sophie's gaze went back and forth between them. "Why do you both look funny?" "We were just talking," Denise said quickly. Sophie studied them with 4-year-old perception. "Were you giving each other hugs?" "Daddy gives me hugs when I have bad dreams." "Something like that," James said, scooping his daughter into his arms. "Come on, let's get you back to bed." "Can Denise come too?" "She tells the best bedtime stories." James met Denise's eyes over Sophie's head. "Would you mind?" "Of course not." As they tucked Sophie back into bed, Denise couldn't help but notice how right this felt, the 3 of them together like a real family. When Sophie insisted they both sit on her bed until she fell asleep, James took Denise's hand in the darkness, their fingers intertwining naturally. "I love you both," Sophie mumbled sleepily, and Denise felt her heart skip a beat. "We love you too, princess," James whispered back, and Denise noticed he said, "we," without hesitation. After Sophie drifted off, they walked back downstairs together, hands still linked. "So," James said softly as they reached the bottom of the stairs. "So," Denise echoed, suddenly shy again. No pressure, he said quickly. We can take this as slow as you need. What if I don't want to take it slow? James's eyes darkened. Then we won't. The next few weeks brought a shift in their relationship that felt as natural as breathing. James would kiss her goodbye in the morning before leaving for work, and she would wait up for him each evening with dinner and conversation. They were careful to keep displays of affection gentle around Sophie, but the little girl seemed to sense the change and approved wholeheartedly. Are you and Daddy boyfriend and girlfriend now? Sophie asked one afternoon as they painted pictures at the kitchen table. Denise nearly choked on her water. What makes you ask that? He smiles at you the way Prince Eric smiles at Princess Ariel in my movie? And you get all red when he looks at you. Sophie dipped her brush in pink paint with the serious concentration only a 4-year-old could manage. I think you should get married. Sophie, Denise laughed, you can't just decide people should get married. Why not? You love each other and we all live together already. Maria says that's what families do. Out of the mouths of babes indeed. Before Denise could respond, James's voice came from the doorway. What are we discussing that's making Denise turn red? Sophie beamed at her father. I was telling Denise you should get married so we can be a real family forever. James's eyebrows shot up as he looked at Denise's mortified expression. Were you now? She has very strong opinions about these things, Denise mumbled. James moved behind her chair and placed his hands on her shoulders, dropping a kiss on the top of her head. Sophie gets her determination from me. When she wants something, she doesn't give up easily. I want Denise to be my mommy, Sophie announced as if it was the most logical thing in the world. The words hit Denise like a physical blow. She'd been so careful not to overstep, not to assume a parental role, but somewhere along the way, it had happened anyway. Sophie, James said gently, remember we talked about how Denise is our special friend? But friends don't kiss the way you kissed Denise last night when you thought I was asleep, Sophie said innocently. Both adults froze. James's hands tightened on Denise's shoulders. You were supposed to be asleep, he said weakly. I was getting water. You were in the kitchen being all mushy. Sophie giggled. It was gross but also nice. Denise covered her face with her hands. I think I'm going to die of embarrassment. Don't die. Sophie exclaimed, alarmed. Then who will help me with my puzzles? James laughed and pulled out a chair to sit next to them. Sophie, what Denise and I have is special, and yes, it's different from regular friendship. But being a family is complicated. No, it's not, Sophie said with 4-year-old certainty. You love each other, you take care of each other, and you all live together. That's what Maria told me families do. Maria's been busy, James muttered, but he was smiling. That evening, after Sophie was in bed, James found Denise on the back patio looking up at the stars. The night was clear and cool, perfect for thinking. Penny for your thoughts, he said, settling into the chair next to hers. I've been thinking about what Sophie said today, Denise admitted. About being a family. And? I don't want to overstep. I know you've been raising her alone, and I don't want to assume a role that isn't mine to take. James was quiet for a moment. What if I wanted you to assume that role? Denise turned to look at him. What are you saying? I'm saying Sophie's not wrong. We do love each other, we do take care of each other, and we are living together. He reached for her hand. The only thing missing is making it official. James, she whispered, hardly daring to hope. I know it's fast. I know it's crazy. But nothing about our relationship has been conventional from the start. He brought her hand to his lips. I love you, Denise. And more than that, I can't imagine my life without you anymore. Sophie can't either. I love you too, she said, tears starting to flow. I love both of you so much it scares me. Then what are we waiting for? Before she could answer, the patio door slid open and Sophie appeared in her pajamas, dragging her favorite stuffed rabbit. I can't sleep, she announced. Can we have family snuggle time? James and Denise looked at each other and burst out laughing. Come here, princess, James said, opening his arms. Sophie climbed onto his lap, then patted his knee for Denise to join them. This is perfect, Sophie sighed contentedly as Denise settled against James's side with his arm around both of them. This is what I wished for every night when I blew out my birthday candles. What did you wish for? Denise asked softly. A mommy who would love me and daddy and stay forever. Sophie looked up at Denise with absolute trust. I knew you were the right one the minute I saw you. Denise felt tears slip down her cheeks as she kissed the top of Sophie's head. I love you too, sweetheart. More than you could ever know. Enough to stay forever? Denise looked at James, who nodded encouragingly. Yes, she whispered. Forever. 2 months into what felt like a fairy tale, Denise finally felt ready to share the full story of how she'd ended up on that bench. It was a Saturday morning, and Sophie was at a birthday party, leaving James and Denise alone with coffee and the comfortable intimacy they'd built together. "You never really told me how you became homeless," James said gently as they sat in his study, rain pattering against the windows. "I don't want to pry, but I feel like I should know." Denise curled deeper into the leather chair, wrapping her hands around her warm mug. "It's not a very interesting story. Just a series of bad luck. Try me." She took a deep breath. "I grew up with my grandmother in Detroit. My parents died in a car accident when I was 8 and Grandma Rose took me in. She was a seamstress, worked from home, barely made enough to keep us fed and housed. But she gave me everything she could." James listened without interrupting, his dark eyes focused completely on her. "I got a scholarship to community college, studied business administration. I thought I was going to change our lives, you know? Get a good job, take care of Grandma, maybe even buy her a nice house." Denise smiled sadly. "Grandma died my second year of college. Heart attack at her sewing machine. I found her when I came home from classes." "I'm so sorry," James said softly. "I finished school but the grief, it was hard to focus. My grades suffered. The good jobs I dreamed of didn't materialize. I ended up waitressing at a diner, barely making rent on a studio apartment. But it was honest work and I was getting by." "What happened?" "The owner had been sick for months but didn't tell anyone. When he died, his family didn't want the business. They sold the building to developers who wanted to tear it down for condos." Denise's voice grew quiet. "We got 2 weeks' notice. No severance, no help finding new jobs. Just, thank you for your service, good luck." James's jaw tightened. "That's horrible. I applied everywhere but most places wanted experience in restaurants that were still open, or they wanted references from managers who had scattered to other cities. My landlord was understanding for about a month, but then he needed the rent or he'd have to evict me." "You had no family? No friends who could help?" "Grandma was all I had. And my friends were all struggling too. I couch surfed for a few weeks, but you can't impose on people forever." Denise set down her mug with shaking hands. "The shelter was full. The waiting list for assistance was months long. I spent my last money on a storage unit for Grandma's things and then you were on the street. 3 weeks before Sophie found me. The longest 3 weeks of my life." She looked up at him. "I kept thinking about what Grandma would say. She always told me that God never gives you more than you can handle, that there's always hope if you just hold on. But sitting in that snow, I thought maybe I'd finally reached my limit." James stood and moved to kneel beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "I'm so sorry you went through that alone." "The worst part wasn't the cold or the hunger," Denise continued. "It was feeling invisible. Like I'd stopped being human and become just another problem for people to step around." "You were never invisible to me," James said firmly. "From the moment I saw you with Sophie, I knew you were special. Even looking like I did? Especially looking like you did. Do you know what I saw that day? I saw a woman who had lost everything but was still gentle with a child. Who was freezing but tried to refuse a scarf because she didn't want Sophie to be cold. I saw strength and grace and dignity that no amount of hardship could touch." Denise felt tears start again. "Sometimes I still can't believe this is real." "It's real," James assured her. "And you never have to worry about being invisible or homeless or alone again." "James, there's something else." She hesitated, then forged ahead. "I need you to know that I'm not just with you because you saved me. I know it might look that way from the outside." "Stop," he interrupted gently. "I know exactly why you're with me because it's the same reason I'm with you. We fell in love. Everything else is just circumstances." "How can you be so sure?" "Because I've dated women who wanted my money, my status, my lifestyle. I know what that looks like." James cupped her face. "You fight me every time I try to buy you something. You insist on earning your place here. You care more about Sophie's happiness than your own comfort. That's not someone using me, Denise. That's someone loving me." "I do love you," she whispered. "Both of you. More than I ever thought possible." "Then that's all that matters." A car door slammed outside, followed by Sophie's excited voice. James helped Denise to her feet just as their daughter burst through the front door. "Daddy? Denise? I have so much to tell you about the party." Sophie launched herself at them and they caught her together, the three of them laughing as she chattered about cake and games and presents. Looking at James over Sophie's head, Denise felt the last of her fears about the past fade away. This was her family now. This was her future. And it was more beautiful than any dream she'd ever dared to have. Spring arrived early that year, bringing with it a sense of renewal and possibility that seemed to mirror the changes in their lives. Denise had been with them for 4 months now, and the guest house had become more of a formality than a necessity. Most evenings found her in the main house, helping with dinner, homework, and bedtime routines. Most mornings found James in her kitchen, sharing coffee before the day began. "You know," Maria observed one afternoon as she watched Denise fold James's shirts alongside Sophie's tiny dresses, "you might as well move into the main house officially. You're already living like a family." Denise paused in her folding. "Do you think I'm overstepping?" "Honey, Mr. James has been wanting to ask you to move in for weeks. He's just worried about pushing too fast." Maria smiled knowingly. "That man is head over heels for you." "I'm head over heels for him too," Denise admitted. "Sometimes I have to pinch myself to make sure this is really my life now." "It's your life because you deserve it," Maria said firmly. "Don't let anyone tell you different." That evening James proved Maria right. He'd been quieter than usual during dinner, and after Sophie was in bed, he asked Denise to walk with him in the garden. The spring air was soft and warm, perfect for the conversation that had been building between them for weeks. "I have something to ask you," James said as they stopped beside the fountain at the center of the garden. "Okay," Denise replied, though her heart was already racing. "These past 4 months have been the best of my life," he began, taking her hands. "Watching you with Sophie, building this life together, falling more in love with you every day. I can't imagine going back to the way things were before." "I can't either. So I'm wondering if you'd consider making this permanent. Not just the relationship but everything. Move into the house with us. Officially be Sophie's mother. Be my partner in every sense of the word." Denise felt tears prick her eyes. "James, are you asking me to?" "I'm asking you to be my family," he said simply. "In whatever way feels right to you. If you want a formal adoption for Sophie, we'll do that. If you want to get married, I'm more than ready. If you just want to live together as we are, that's perfect too. I just want you here permanently as the woman Sophie and I love more than anything." "Yes," Denise whispered, then louder, "yes to all of it. Yes to being Sophie's mom, yes to being your partner, yes to this life we've built together." James swept her into his arms, spinning her around as she laughed with pure joy. When he set her down, he cupped her face in his hands. "I love you, Denise Washington. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you make everything better just by being here. I love you too, James Rodriguez. I love your generosity and your patience and the way you've given me a family when I thought I'd lost everything." Their kiss was deep and full of promise, sealed by months of growing trust and affection. When they broke apart, both were smiling through tears. "So," James said, his forehead resting against hers, "should we go tell Sophie she's getting her wish? Will she still be awake?" "Are you kidding? She has supernatural radar for important family conversations. I guarantee she's listening at her bedroom door right now." As if summoned by his words, they heard the sound of small feet running across the upstairs hallway. "Sophie Maria Rodriguez," James called in his stern father voice, "get back in that bed." A guilty giggle echoed from the house, followed by the sound of a door closing quickly. "Think she heard anything?" Denise asked innocently. "Only everything," James laughed. "Come on, let's go make it official." They found Sophie back in bed, covers pulled up to her chin and eyes wide with excitement. "Were you listening?" Denise asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Maybe a little," Sophie admitted. "Are you going to be my real mommy now?" "If you want me to be," Denise said softly. Sophie launched herself into Denise's arms with such force they both fell backward onto the bed. "I want you to be my mommy forever and ever and ever." "Forever and ever it is," Denise promised, holding the little girl tight. James joined them on the bed, wrapping his arms around both his girls. "So it's settled then. We're officially a family. The best family in the whole world," Sophie declared. "Can I call you mommy now?" The word hit Denise like a beautiful punch to the heart. "Oh, sweetheart, yes. Yes, you can call me mommy." "Mommy," Sophie said experimentally, then again with more confidence. "Mommy, mommy, mommy. I have a mommy." As Sophie chattered excitedly about all the things they would do now that they were a real family, Denise caught James watching her with an expression of complete contentment. "No regrets?" he asked quietly. "Only one," she replied. His face fell slightly. "What's that?" "I wish Grandma Rose could have met you both. She would have loved you." James's expression softened. "She sounds like an amazing woman. Sophie and I would have loved her too. She would have been so happy to know I found my family," Denise murmured. then looked around at the two people who had become her entire world. She always said that love has a way of finding you when you need it most. Smart woman, James said, pressing a kiss to her temple. The smartest, Denise agreed, settling deeper into the embrace of her new family. Outside, spring rain began to fall gently against the windows, but inside, all was warm and safe and perfect. 6 months after that snowy day at the bus stop, James surprised Denise with a weekend trip. Sophie was staying with Maria's family for a special sleepover, and he'd packed a bag for Denise without telling her their destination. "This is very mysterious," Denise said as they drove through the countryside outside the city. "Are you kidnapping me?" "Something like that," James replied with a smile that made her stomach flutter. "Trust me? Always." They arrived at a charming bed and breakfast nestled in the mountains, the kind of romantic hideaway that belonged in fairy tales. Their room overlooked a lake that reflected the setting sun like a mirror, and dinner was served by candlelight on a private terrace. "This is incredible," Denise said as they finished dessert. "But what's the occasion? Do I need an occasion to want to spoil the woman I love?" "No, but you have that look." "What look?" "The same look you had when you told me Sophie was staying overnight. Like you're planning something." James laughed. "Sophie said you'd figure it out. She said you have smart mommy powers." The casual way he said mommy still sent warmth through Denise's chest. Sophie had taken to the word immediately, using it constantly as if making up for lost time. "So what are you planning?" Instead of answering, James stood and held out his hand. "Walk with me." They strolled down to the lake shore, where string lights had been hung between the trees and soft music played from hidden speakers. It was beautiful and romantic and clearly not a coincidence. "James," Denise said slowly, "what is this?" "This is the part where I tell you that 6 months ago I thought my life was complete. I had Sophie, I had my work, I had everything I thought I needed." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "I was wrong." Denise's heart began to race as James reached into his jacket pocket. "You didn't just complete my life, Denise. You transformed it. You brought love and laughter and light into places I didn't even know were dark. You made Sophie bloom in ways I never could have on my own. You made me remember what it feels like to be part of a real partnership." "James," she whispered as he dropped to one knee, pulling out a small velvet box. "I know this is fast. I know we've only been together 6 months. But I also know that I want to spend the rest of my life loving you." He opened the box to reveal a stunning but simple diamond ring. "Denise Washington, will you marry me? Will you be Sophie's mother and my wife and the heart of our family?" Tears streamed down her face as she looked at this incredible man kneeling before her. 6 months ago she'd had nothing. Now she had everything she'd ever dreamed of and more. "Yes," she said through her tears. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." James's face broke into a grin as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, sparkling in the light from the trees. He stood and swept her into his arms, spinning her around as she laughed with pure joy. "I love you," he said against her lips before kissing her deeply. "I love you too," she replied when they broke apart. "But James, this ring, it's too much." "Nothing is too much for you," he said firmly. "Besides, Sophie helped pick it out. She said it had to be sparkly but not too fancy, because you don't like show-offy things." "Sophie helped pick it out?" "She's been planning this proposal for weeks. She made me practice my speech in front of her stuffed animals." James grinned. "She also insisted I ask for her permission first. And?" She said, and I quote, "Daddy, you better marry Denise before someone else does because she's the best mommy in the whole world, and if you let her get away, I'll be very upset with you." Denise laughed through her tears. "That sounds like our daughter." "Our daughter?" James repeated softly. "I love the sound of that." "When?" Denise asked, looking at the ring on her finger. "When do you want to get married?" "Tomorrow if you want. Or we can plan something elaborate. Whatever makes you happy. I want Sophie to be involved. I want her to feel like this is her wedding too, in a way." "She already has opinions about that," James admitted. "She wants to be the flower girl, she wants Maria to make the cake, and she wants to wear a pink dress that matches yours." "Pink it is," Denise laughed. "What about you? What do you want?" James cupped her face gently. "I want you to be my wife. Everything else is just details." That night, they called Sophie from their room, putting her on speakerphone so they could both talk to her. "Did you ask her?" Sophie demanded before they could even say hello. "I asked her," James confirmed. "And? Did she say yes?" "She better have said yes." "I said yes, sweetheart," Denise laughed. Sophie's squeal was so loud they had to hold the phone away from their ears. I'm getting a mommy. A real mommy. Maria. Daddy asked Denise to marry him and she said yes. They could hear Maria's delighted laughter in the background, followed by rapid Spanish that sounded like prayers of thanksgiving. When's the wedding? Sophie asked when she came back to the phone. Can I help plan it? Can I wear pink? Can I carry flowers? Yes to everything, Denise promised. This is your wedding too, Sophie. We're all becoming a family together. I'm so happy I could pop. Sophie declared. I told everyone at school that my daddy was going to marry my mommy, and now it's really happening. After they hung up, James and Denise sat on their balcony looking out at the lake, planning their future together. Small wedding? James asked. Definitely. Just the people who matter most. That's maybe 20 people total. Perfect. Denise snuggled closer to him. James, I need you to know something. What's that? I'm not marrying you because you rescued me. I'm marrying you because you're the love of my life. I know, he said, kissing the top of her head. Just like I'm not marrying you because I need help with Sophie. I'm marrying you because I can't imagine my life without you. Good, Denise said firmly. I wanted to make sure we were clear on that. Crystal clear, James agreed. This is about love, pure and simple. As they sat together planning their wedding and their future, Denise thought about that frozen day at the bus stop. She'd lost everything and thought her life was over. Instead, it had been the beginning of everything she'd ever wanted. Sometimes the worst moments led to the most beautiful ones. Sometimes little girls with big hearts knew exactly what their families needed. And sometimes, love really did find you when you needed it most. The wedding took place on a perfect spring day in the garden behind the Rodriguez house. Maria had outdone herself with flowers and decorations, creating an intimate ceremony space that felt both elegant and personal. Sophie, resplendent in a pink dress with a full skirt, had appointed herself the official wedding coordinator and took her duties very seriously. Mommy, you look like a princess, Sophie breathed as Denise put the finishing touches on her makeup in the guest house that had been her first home with them. The dress was simple but beautiful cream-colored silk with delicate beading that caught the light when she moved. James had wanted to buy her something elaborate and expensive, but Denise had chosen this one because it felt like her, not like someone she was trying to be. You look like a princess too, sweetheart, Denise replied, adjusting Sophie's flower crown. Are you ready to be my flower girl? I've been ready my whole life, Sophie declared solemnly, then giggled. That's what Daddy said when you asked if he was ready to marry you. A knock at the door interrupted them. Come in, Denise called. Maria entered with tears already in her eyes. Oh my dear. You're beautiful. Thank you, Maria. For everything. For welcoming me, for helping with the wedding, for being family. You were family the moment you put that child's happiness before your own, Maria replied, hugging her carefully so as not to wrinkle the dress. Mr. James is the luckiest man in the world. I think I'm the lucky one. You both are, Sophie announced. I picked the best mommy and daddy in the world. The ceremony itself was small and perfect. James stood at the altar looking handsome in his dark suit, but it was the expression on his face when he saw Denise walking toward him that took her breath away. Love, joy, and absolute certainty shone in his dark eyes. Sophie took her role as flower girl seriously, scattering rose petals with careful precision before taking her place as Denise's maid of honor, a role she'd insisted on after James explained that the bride's best friend stood beside her during the wedding. I'm Mommy's best friend, Sophie had declared. I found her first. The vows they'd written brought tears to every eye present. James spoke of second chances and unexpected love, of how Denise had taught him that his heart was bigger than he'd ever imagined. Denise talked about finding home in people rather than places, about how love had rescued her in ways that went far beyond the physical. But it was Sophie who stole the show during the ring exchange. Wait, she called out just as James was about to slip the wedding band onto Denise's finger. I have something too. She reached into her small purse and pulled out a silver bracelet with a heart charm. Daddy helped me pick this out. Says best mommy ever on the back. It's so you'll always remember that I picked you. Denise knelt down so Sophie could fasten the bracelet around her wrist, tears flowing freely now. I could never forget that you picked me, sweetheart. You saved my life. You saved mine too, Sophie whispered, throwing her arms around Denise's neck. When the minister finally pronounced them husband and wife, James's kiss was tender and full of promise. But the biggest cheer came when he scooped Sophie up for a three-way family hug. Ladies and gentlemen, the minister announced with a smile, I present to you the Rodriguez family. The reception was held in the same garden, with Maria's famous tres leches cake and dancing under the string lights. Sophie insisted on the first dance with both her parents, standing on James's feet while holding Denise's hands as they swayed to music. "This is the best day ever," Sophie declared. "We're really a family now." "We were always a family," Denise corrected gently. "Now it's just official." As the evening wound down and the last guest departed, the three of them sat on the patio where James had proposed months earlier. Sophie had fallen asleep curled between them, still in her pink dress but with her flower crown askew. "No regrets?" James asked softly, the same question he'd asked that first night. "Only that it took so long for us to find each other," Denise replied, adjusting Sophie's crown and smoothing her hair. "Maybe it happened exactly when it was supposed to," James suggested. "Maybe we all needed to be ready for each other." Denise thought about that snowy day at the bus stop, about how desperate and hopeless she'd felt. If someone had told her then that 6 months later she'd be married to a wonderful man with a beautiful daughter who called her mommy, she would have thought they were crazy. "Thank you," she said suddenly. "For what?" "For seeing me that day. For not walking past like everyone else. For giving me a chance to be part of your family." "Thank you for taking that chance," James replied. "For trusting us enough to stay. For loving Sophie like she was your own from the very beginning." "She is my own," Denise said firmly. "Biology doesn't make a mother. Love does." Sophie stirred in her sleep, mumbling something that sounded like, "My mommy and daddy." "We should get her to bed," James said. "In a minute. I just want to remember this, all of us together on our wedding day, everything perfect and peaceful." James leaned over and kissed her gently. "Every day with you feels like this. Perfect and peaceful and exactly right." As they finally carried their sleeping daughter inside and tucked her into bed, Denise reflected on the journey that had brought them here. A year ago she'd lost everything and thought her life was over. Tonight she was a wife and mother with a home full of love and laughter. "Sweet dreams, my beautiful daughter," she whispered, kissing Sophie's forehead. "Sweet dreams, my beautiful wife," James echoed, pulling Denise close as they headed to their room now, officially and permanently. Outside, snow began to fall gently, dusting the garden where they'd celebrated their new beginning. But inside, all was warm and bright and full of the kind of love that transforms everything it touches. The little girl who had approached a homeless stranger at a bus stop had been right all along. They had needed each other, the woman who needed a home and the child who needed a mommy. And in finding each other, they discovered that the best families aren't born, they're built with love, patience and faith in the possibility of happy endings.